Good morning, Toby. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Absolutely fantastic. I've been looking forward to talk with you and the reason why is because this is my subject. This is how I have lived for the past umpteen million years. I mean, Strange Arrivals season number 3 is now available. Folklore, urban legend, campfire talk. Are UFOs real? And the reason why I ask that is because I step into a forest every day, and I'm telling you, there's something very alien in this forest that is teaching me on a daily basis.
Oh, really? What is it teaching you? What do you
just wisdom, ways to look at life differently. I almost feel like I'm a silent wolf underneath the brush, and it's my job to watch and to learn and to take a lot of notes.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, do I believe in UFOs? There's a lot of people who have experiences that they can't understand, like
right.
whether that means that there are aliens visiting the Earth. Like I don't know. I don't necessarily think so. But even the people who are looking into UFOs, like a lot of them don't think it's aliens. Right. They think it's something that's more sort of earthbound and complicated, and that all these different sort of paranormal things that we see all kind of come from one source. So like poltergeists and UFOs and, werewolves or whatever are all kind of coming from this one thing that is sort of earthbound.
Yeah. I'm in agreement with you on that because, I mean, it's almost like there's a source of energy out there, and it's going to take its own shape so that you can understand it in your own language, whereas somebody else might see it as something else.
Yeah, and I think even like going back over the centuries, right, is some people say, like stories of fairies back in the Middle Ages, and again, werewolves, and just the different ways we've kind of interpreted these things has changed over the years. Like as our technology gets better, as our society changes, we kind of understand it based on where we are at that time. So, as soon as we develop airplanes and things that are up in the sky a lot, suddenly it's UFOs, it's strange craft in the sky. It's sort of nuts and bolts, like made out of metal type things that land in fields. So this definitely, that's a way a lot of people who've been studying it a lot kind of think about it as being a lot of it's our interpretation of it, and it's not just the way the thing actually is.
Mm-hmm. You guys really dig deep in Strange Arrivals in the way that your guests, this is authentic, and this is what listeners need to tap into, because I mean, you're talking with U.S. military intelligence, and you've got Chris Carter from X-Files. This is no joke. This is the real deal on this podcast.
Oh, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I mean, we, that's the idea, is to try and get in touch with people who, have sort of authentic knowledge or have interesting ways of looking at the issue that people might not have heard of before, or might just might be a new perspective. So yeah, I mean, it kind of runs the gamut. Chris Carter, I think a lot of what people sort of understand about UFOs comes from watching the X-Files, mm-hmm. right? So it's interesting to talk to him about where did he get those ideas? How much did, actual UFO stories influence the plots that he wrote? What did he think was interesting or important about it? So I try to come at the UFO issue from different angles.
When you put an episode together, do you think of those days when the only place that we ever got talk like this was on late night radio? Because what you're doing is you're bringing light to a subject that's always been hidden away in dark places.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's right. And I think the other thing that's hard is that there's so much stuff out there that it's just kind of speculation, just people talking.
Yeah.
And it's like, how can you get to what we actually kind of know, or what seems sort of authentic? I think you're talking about Art Bell.
Yep.
Who back, I don't even know when it started, but definitely in the 80s and 90s, he for 4 or 5 hours every night, like across the country, would have guests on, and they would talk about, a lot of it was UFOs, but, conspiracies, other kind of weird paranormal stuff. Right. And that's how that information kind of got out there. And, if you're filling up 4 or 5 hours a night, day after day after day, some of the stuff is really good and some of it's like sort of okay. And so doing the podcast, it was really trying to drill down to, what are sort of the most interesting, sort of compelling stories. What do people who are skeptics, what do they think actually happened? Yeah. What can we learn from these stories? What's kind of interesting about them beyond like, is it really aliens or is it not aliens? So that's been sort of my take through, now 3 seasons.
Well, you're not afraid to use the soundbite. You're not afraid to put all sides of people's points of view in there. And that really draws me in as a listener because it's like you're talking with real people as well.
Yeah, as much as possible, I've tried to get the actual witnesses, for more recent events, if I can interview them. And then for a lot of things, like I did a bunch of episodes on Betty and Barney Hill, who were a couple from New Hampshire who believed they were abducted in 1961, and they were on a lot of radio. Mm-hmm. I mean, they became sort of minor celebrities. So there was a lot of radio stuff that I could take and get their own voices telling their story and representing in the way that was sort of most authentic for them. But then also getting, scientists and researchers who can say like, well, this is a problem because a lot of what they remembered was under hypnosis. And when you're under hypnosis, you're not sort of, it's not like a movie's replaying in your head. Yeah. Like it's a much more complicated thing that has to do with imagination and your feelings about things and so on. So it's trying to give like a full picture of the possibilities.
Would it be a waste of money and time if you were to, to kind of go into a rebirth of the Rendlesham Forest? In other words, to go like all these years later, let's go back in there and find out what's going on. Is there any type of evidence of their physical situation?
Yeah, my guess is that, so this happened in 1981. Yep. And that it was, the Air Force went in, and it's actually on the podcast. You can hear like tape that was taken at the time they were doing this, and they went in with like Geiger counters and star scopes, which are like night vision scopes, to try and investigate it. I don't know if you would be able to find anything at this late date. I know that there was a guy named David Clark in England who went back, I think maybe in the 2000s. I can't remember the exact date, but he went and the government basically said, here's everything we have on this case, and gave him this big binder. And he was very excited. And then it turned out a lot of the binder was just these sort of letters to the editor about the Rendlesham Forest thing, with just people with their opinions and stuff, and that there wasn't a whole lot of actual evidence that they had. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like from talking to both witnesses and then researchers that this is one of the ones that we're probably not going to know much more than we know now. And it's just a matter of like, who writes the best book, I guess, as to what the public ends up thinking about it.
And yet it inspires me because I'm that guy that enters the forest. I don't need a Geiger counter. Just let me go sit in this forest and let me just listen and find out if something's been planted inside the rings of these trees. Yeah,
and I think, there's a lot, like some of these sites are like, almost pilgrimage sites, and I think, Roswell, New Mexico, there's a big festival. People go there all the time. And there's other sites like that. Rendlesham Forest is one. Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where the Mothman was.
I know that one.
Yeah, I mean it's so that's something I do in this season, and where he was actually seen is this really weird, like huge area where they used to store munitions during World War II, and they have these things called igloos, which are like these little mounds. And you'd go in there and there were just like these storage things, and now they're empty, but they're like these concrete bunkers. And people just say it's really, really spooky. But people go there and they walk around, and sort of commune with the area where the Mothman and like some UFOs and stuff, all this paranormal stuff happened.
Is there a side of your creative personality as well as the journalist touch that you've got that if we did make connection with an outside alien, would we see a major change in groups taking shape such as Scientology? In other words, it's all of a sudden, oh, I've got a different belief now. Let's form this group. Let's form this group. Let's form this group. Because it seems like people they're seeking, but it's for something that we can't see yet. But if it appears, what's your gut?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's already these groups have already formed.
Yeah.
Based on not a whole lot, right? Like you think about Heaven's Gate, the group where I think it was 39 people committed suicide.
They did. Yep.
And that was all based around it was a UFO cult, right? They thought a UFO was going to come and take them away, and that was eventually why they took their own lives. But yeah, there's a bunch of different sort of new religious movements from my viewpoint, like really compelling that they're real. So if there was like some solid evidence, yeah, I mean, I think 100% that would change a lot of things in the way a lot of people kind of saw themselves in the world and the universe and what they kind of believed.
You're going to think I'm a freak here, and this is not a conspiracy theory, but this is just something that I feel in my gut. I believe that COVID was an attack by an alien. I really do. I think that they were testing. It wasn't human against human. I think it was something out there that dropped something down here.
That's interesting, too. Have you read The Andromeda Strain?
No.
By Michael Crichton?
No.
So this is it's a science fiction book, but it's basically the idea is if we're going to run into an alien life form, the most likely thing it's going to be is like a bacteria or a germ or a virus or something like that. And it's basically about how I think it's a meteor comes to Earth with this bacteria or virus or whatever. I can't remember. It's a long time. And how we just don't have any way of dealing with it, right? And it just, and it's COVID-like, right? It just spreads across the earth, and people don't know how to manage it.
See, that's like with Perseverance up on Mars. What is that little monkey up there going to pick up that's going to come back here, and it's going to be like, oh my God, we should have just left it up there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know. It is one of those weird. I was reading a piece in a newspaper with somebody who's like, why are we beaming out these signals to space to say, here we are? Like, do we really want them to come? Like, who knows what they want? Be careful what you're asking for.
How do you write and put the show together in the way that you do? Because it is so presented well. I mean, I know you have to sit down with your, the directors and the producers and things like that, but it's so well put together.
Oh, well, thanks. What I do is I do all these interviews. We find out if there's any kind of audio out there from radio shows or what have you. And, I kind of just lay out what I have, what's really interesting, kind of lay it all out. And then I kind of write between all these things so they kind of make sense when you put them all together. And I kind of come up with like what I kind of think about it. Right. And I kind of put that in. But it really, if you take a look at like early drafts, it's really just little blocks of like people talking in interviews or clips from radio shows or what have you. And then I just spend a lot of time writing my sort of voiceover stuff.
Yeah, because it's definitely conversation, and it's a conversation starter, and both of those have got to work hand in hand, because it's fun to get into a conversation with outside people about things, strange arrivals, and then it's like people sitting around talking about professional wrestling or the NFL. When people are locked in, there's a great conversation out here.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those things where people, they feel pretty strongly. People who've seen stuff that they can't understand, like they're passionate about it. They want you to, if not necessarily believe them, at least sort of understand the impact it had on them. So, some of the interviews I've had, I walk away feeling really energized.
Yeah.
because it's just they're so, intense and really want to get their story across and want people to understand what they've been through.
Wow. Toby, you got to come back to this show anytime in the future. I mean, I didn't even get to the one main question. In fact, I bet I've got just about a minute to be with you one more time. I got to ask you this question. You bring up a very important part here, and that question is, if we came in contact, would we trust our instinct? I love how you put that out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, when you see something that you can't explain, like, how do you take it in? How do you comprehend it? How do you figure out how you understand it? And it's a tough one. And I think it's one of the things that's hard with when you're talking to people about witnessing UFOs.
Yeah.
It's, what is it that you actually saw, and what is it you trying to make sense of it? It's, for a lot of people, this is like a sort of life-changing event. So yeah, like I said, I find some of those conversations to be, very affecting.
Right. Season 3 of Strange Arrivals on iHeartRadio, but you got to take it in from season 1 too, because it's just unbelievable what you're doing here. Please come back to this show anytime in the future, Toby.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Excellent. Well, you be brilliant today, okay, sir?
Okay. Thank you very much.